Let me actually sit up straight. All right, everyone, welcome back to What's Growing On. Thanks for joining us today. And as always, I am Dorothy Dorton with AARP Alabama, and I have with me Terrence Lanier with Victory Teaching Farm. So we are really excited today to talk about something that our viewers actually asked us to go over with them, and that is, how do you start your own community garden, or a garden in your area or neighborhood or community and everything. So Taryn has put together a great show for us today to talk just about that. And as always, we'll include the slides in the Facebook comment section of this broadcast, and you can always go back and look at this broadcast like all of our others if you want to reference it or share it with a friend. So Taryn, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So I know we were just talking kind of about the history of Victory and kind of what you've done, and how to kind of keep it sustained and everything. So let's get started by talking about, can you tell us a little bit about the history of Victory Teaching Farm and how you basically grew this from just a tiny little garden to this beautiful farm that has field trips and stuff?
Yeah, so the idea just came about one day, and we decided to start a small community garden. And from there, we just kind of started knocking on doors and looking to expand programs, looking to expand partnerships, all with the ultimate goal of having an urban teaching farm, kind of a centralized source for field trips and, to serve the community, provide fresh produce, have workshops, things like that. And so took us 5 years working really, really hard. And then we finally were able to find the perfect plot of land, which we actually turned down the first time because they didn't want to. I think they envisioned something like a home garden, and I said, no, this is bigger than that. I want the entire space, and we actually walked away from it, but it came back to us. So it was always meant to be. But yeah, there was a definite, it was a definite several year process in working towards that, and continues to be a process. It's not something that's one and done, it's a constant of keeping it going, keeping it sustainable, and overcoming hurdles such as weather, COVID.
Yes. Yes. Hurricanes.
Yes. Things you don't, some things you don't necessarily even expect to encounter. So.
Right. Well, you've done an amazing job. And I can remember when you were in that little plot of land by the other community center, and you've just grown it into something so wonderful and marvelous. And I know you've got a great board that helps out and all that great stuff. So you were talking about the beginning. So if somebody really wants to start their own community garden, where to begin? Let's talk about that.
Okay, so in all of this, everything in here is my own personal experience, my own take on what worked, what didn't work, what needed to happen, mistakes we made along the way. And so all of this is coming from my own experience over the last 10 years. So where to begin? You definitely need to have a core group of volunteers, because again, it's not, plan it and walk away. It's a constant project that you need to maintain. And other than that, you definitely need someone familiar with gardening. Now, granted, there are a million resources out there, but it's really good to have somebody that just has even just the basics, and then you can build on that. But you definitely, the volunteer piece, unless you're going to be able to hire employees or something like that, you definitely need a committed core group of volunteers to get it started and keep it going.
Absolutely, absolutely. Volunteers are the heart. We know that very well here at AARP. So, and of course, you like you said, you have to have somebody who's familiar with gardening because you've got to start somewhere with some knowledge. So, awesome. Next, we're going to talk about some of the resources that we can use. So, can you tell us about those, Terrence?
Yeah, and I just want to hit on the familiar with gardening piece. It doesn't mean that you went to school for agriculture or that you have, completed a particular, gardening program at your local extension center or something like that. It could just be that you grew up always with a garden, or your grandparents were farmers. I mean, that is my background. It's all self-learned, self-taught. We've had, my grandparents had a farm area and always had a garden. We've always had a garden. My parents always had a garden. I've always had a garden. So really it was all, kind of a self-taught with also utilizing resources that are available, because you're never going to stop. You're never going to know everything about it.
Right.
So you're always going to continue to learn. But so it doesn't need to be, you're professionally, educated as far as how to grow food. But there are lots of resources. Pretty much every county or community has some type of local extension office. Sometimes they're connected to your university, but these offices have people available to help you along the way with everything that you need to know. They have pamphlets and handouts and write-ups and resources that you can utilize to get started. If you have questions about, certain pests and things like that, they're a really great resource. And also, there are a lot of colleges that have agricultural programs. A lot of times, these universities have students that are looking for internships or looking to do service hours, or have particular projects that they're trying to complete that would be a nice addition to your particular garden. Local gardening groups. There's lots of local gardening groups all over. I know personally, just here in Mobile, we have our mobile botanical gardens. We have mobile master gardeners. We have mobile urban growers. And I hope I'm not leaving anybody out, but there's a lot of groups. The extension system. There's a lot of groups that are available to that are also looking for volunteers, but and of course Victory Teaching Farm, that are also available to help and guide you, because that's kind of their goal. Your local farmers and growers. I have learned over the years, as we've collaborated and became partners with all of our local farmers and growers in Mobile and Baldwin County, and even some in north of here. They are always very willing and very happy to answer any questions that you have. So they are a resource as well. And then, of course, you always have the library, a good old-fashioned library, and the internet. You can pretty much find anything about anything on the internet that you need to know.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so
question.
We do have a quick question. Let's see real quick. Does a community garden need to be established as a business of some kind to be able to get financial support?
So it depends on, so we established Victory Teaching Farm as a nonprofit, a 501c3, and that was so we could write grants and be eligible for funding through different organizations. You can set it up. I mean, there's a lot of gardens that are just set up as a sustainable entity, and they're not any kind of business of any sort. So you don't have to. It just kind of depends on. If you got a huge donor that's going to fund it, you may not necessarily need to go the nonprofit route. But you don't have to. There's many ways that you can do it, to get financial support. But if you're looking for grants, if you're looking to get state funding or federal funding, even most foundations, you have to be a 501c3 to do that.
And that's actually a great question and a great answer to it, because that leads us into what is your vision. So if your vision is, looking at a nonprofit or just a local small community group, what is your vision? Tell us about what you need to figure out for this, Terrence.
Right. So exactly. What is your vision? What is it that you're wanting to accomplish with the garden? Are you wanting to set up a school garden in one of your local schools or local preschools? A community garden that is open and available to the surrounding community members. A garden at the place of worship that maybe helps support a food pantry that may be within that place of worship. And so then that kind of determines what your focus area is going to be. So are you going to do it for education? For instance, if you're setting up in a school, there's an education component to that. Community outreach, if you're doing a community garden or a CSA, which is community supported agriculture, and that's where the community buys shares of the produce, and that helps support the garden in continuing to grow. Are you going to look at doing a for-profit garden, maybe to support some other endeavor? So you determining what it is you see the garden accomplishing is really going to determine kind of what route you take, which actually I think takes us into our next slide.
Yep, absolutely. So once we've got our vision of what we kind of want to do, now it's time to pick our site.
Yes, so now it's time to pick your site. So now that you know what you want to do and what you want your garden to accomplish and who you want your garden to serve or benefit, that's when you start looking into where can we start this garden? Where can we put this garden? So many schools have huge green space. They have playgrounds. They have areas that you could put raised beds in. And most schools are very, very open to having someone come in and set up some type of school garden program. So many of them are already doing it themselves, but that I have experienced, and we've actually done several, they're very open to doing that because they can adapt and still teach some of their lessons, but they can use the garden to do that. So it gets the children outside, it gets them fresh air. They're still accomplishing what they need to do with their curriculum, but they're able to include kind of real life hands in the dirt, math, history, reading, science, obviously. All of those things can be incorporated into their lessons by using the garden. Places of worship. Many places of worship have food pantries to serve their community. And so, again, a lot of places of worship have big green spaces and are very open to having someone come in and partner with them to do that. City property or school system property. In our experience, we actually had, I had said in the beginning, we turned down the property that we have now in the very beginning, but we also had another piece of property that was made available to us through the school system, because a lot of times school systems have lots that they've purchased or land that they've purchased that either there was no longer a need for a school there or things changed or maybe a school was torn down. And a lot of times they're open to that. Same thing with the city. Cities have vacant lots. They have, vacant properties. And that's actually what we ended up in. It was kind of a combination of two. It was school system property with an old school that was no longer being utilized, but the city worked with the school system to utilize that property for a Parks and Rec program, and they had the huge green space. So we kind of had half city, half school system property, but it was the perfect property, and it was available, and it wasn't being used. And actually, at one point in time, it was being considered for overflow parking from one of our local stadiums. So we like to feel like, and we like to think that we saved that green space from becoming, a concrete parking lot. There's also private property. A lot of people own private lots. And, you may find out in your group of volunteers or your group of people you're working with that somebody has a vacant lot that they'd be willing to offer up. And then partner organization properties. The very first site we had was at a community center. And so we were partnering with them to use their space. The second site we partnered with our local food bank and helped them get, their program started. We partnered with a homeless transition program and helped them kind of start some gardening programs. And so it may or may not be, again, it kind of comes back to what your focus is. You may just want to help people set up gardens. It just depends on, what you want to do, but there is definitely opportunity. You just have to You just have to bang on those doors and seek it out.
Absolutely. And we have another quick question. How much money do you need to begin a community garden? And I'd say this kind of goes with what your vision is. So
yes, it does. Good morning, Mr. Hawkins. Yes, it does. It depends on what your vision is and, the size. We actually started with $1,000. And that kind of started our, first garden. But I will say, once you get established and you have, there are those upfront costs. But once you are established and have what you need, being sustainable and not really needing a huge source of income, unless you're needing to pay salaries and things like that, is pretty easy to do on a minimal budget.
Excellent. Great question, Mr. Bill. We appreciate that. Thank you. And so next, we're going to talk about, you've got your site picked out, you've got your vision, you've got your site picked out. Now, the must-haves that you really need to get started.
Right. So, and you may have what you think is an ideal site. You may have a partner or a school that says, we want it here. But then when you actually look and see, there may be limited sunshine. You have to have sunshine. Full 6+ hours per day of direct sunlight to be able to really have a flourishing, vegetable and fruit garden. Water access is a must, especially, down here when we have these long, hot summers and we're in drought, and you definitely need to have some kind of water access. We actually put in an irrigation meter at Victory Teaching Farm, so we would have that water access. You need good soil. One of the sites that we initially were offered, which was an old schoolyard, was red construction dirt underneath the grass. So definitely not good for growing. We would have had to bring in a lot of soil, to be able to actually, start something there. So we had to turn that piece of property down, which, it feels really, it's really hard to turn down a piece of property when somebody says, yeah, you can use this. But if it's not going to be sufficient to do what you need to do, you're just going to be, cutting your nose off to spite your face. So, and you need enough space. I mean, you can do a lot in a very, very small space. I mean, we talked about this in one of our previous episodes of being able to grow on balconies and, without, a large yard. But you need to have enough space to do what you're wanting to do. So if you are wanting to grow to provide a supplement to a food pantry, you need to know that you've got enough that you're going to be able to do that on a regular basis. Facilities are pretty important, restroom facilities, because if you've got volunteers and things like that, you need somewhere for some type of shelter, whether it be from, the rain or the sun, and then restrooms, of course. So, so definitely these are things that you need to take. You may think you have the most perfect piece of property and it just seems wonderful, but then if you don't have all of these key components, you're going to have some problems being successful.
Right. So great advice. And we have another great question from Mr. Hawkins. Do you need any type of insurance when you're getting started?
So again, there is liability insurance that we carry because we serve, the community. And so again, it's going to depend on what it is you're doing, what your focus is. Are you going to be for profit? Do you need a business license? I mean, again, it comes down to exactly what your focus is and what type of garden you're going to have. But definitely carry liability insurance. You need to have that because you're going to have people on site, and you need to be able, if something happens, if somebody gets stung by a bee and has a reaction, or trips, or you need to have that coverage in place to protect the organization itself.
Absolutely. Great question. Great answer. All right. So we've got our must-haves. Now we're going to get into talking about the sustainability of your community garden. So tell us about some of these ideas.
Okay. So again, I mentioned that, you do have those upfront costs of getting started. And there's lots of ways you can go about doing that. If you're not a nonprofit and you're not writing for grants, which that's one of the ways to help fund the program, you can do donations. You can ask for donations. We actually had a few donations in the very beginning that kind of helped us. And then fundraising. Have fundraisers. We have an annual fundraiser every year, which unfortunately it was canceled last year because of COVID. But we're hoping that maybe we can kick the fall off again this year with our farm raiser. And it's our big fundraising event for the year. And it's a great, opportunity to raise funds, to involve the community. You can look at having a source of profit from your garden. So this is another thing that like I said, everything I'm talking about today is from my own experience. You can look at, selling the produce. Now we did give away produce to those in need around us in the neighborhood, which it's interesting. The neighbors surrounding the farm, when we first moved in, we took our first crop and we went door to door introducing ourselves to the neighbors and giving them fresh produce just to let them know we were there and this is what we were doing. And most of them were senior citizens on fixed income. But it's very interesting. They did not want to continue to take produce from us. They wanted to be able to pay. And so that actually helped us to continue. And that's one of the things they said, well, we want you to keep growing. So, that was a source of profit for our garden that we could put right back into it. Partnerships are great. A lot of times partnerships will provide volunteers that help with some of the big jobs that you have at the farm. We have a great partnership with one of our local private schools that every year around the same time in October, they come to us with 40 plus students and they help us get our fall planting done. And that's a huge, something that would take, our small little group, days and days and days. These kids and their teachers get out there and knock it out in one day for us. And then also, once you get going, really your biggest expenses are going to be any kind of utilities or water that you have, purchasing tools when you need those. But if that's something that you've done up front, now you always have to replace stuff. But on an ongoing, if you're saving your seeds and you're composting, those are two of the constant expenses that you have other than like water, is your plants. And so if you're saving your seeds, then you don't have to worry about buying new transplants every season because you've saved your seeds from each one. If you're composting, then you have that source of nutrition as well as that soil, because soil is another thing. If you've got raised beds, eventually you have to continue to replenish the soil. It's just from harvesting and just natural settling. You're always going to have to continue to replenish soil. So seed saving and composting are great ways to be sustainable in the fact of that you still will continue to grow.
Excellent. That's such great advice. And I love the fact, the story about going to door and offering, and then they wanting to come back and actually, pay for more produce and stuff, because that's really the sense of the community and the community garden. They're supporting, the community's supporting you, you're supporting them. So that's really great. And, I think, you said that like the seed saving and the composting, I mean, that is a big expense. So there's a lot of things you can do. And, if you're volunteers, if, you have your work day and your volunteers, ask them if they have garden tools to bring them along and help, that way you don't have to buy so many tools for everybody. Just great ideas. And one thing that I did want to point out is you mentioned grants.
Yes.
And we actually, AARP actually has a grant open right now. It's the Challenge Grant. And it is for something that is a quick turnaround in your community that kind of uplifts your community in a way. And Victory Teaching Farm actually was the recipient of one of these grants back in 2017. And so they were able to build an accessible deck kind of a raised gardening deck. And we were really excited to have that happen. But it's got a ramp up to it and raised garden beds for folks who may have trouble bending over or who are in a wheelchair. So that's just an example, a beautiful example of something that this grant can be for. So be sure to check that out, especially if you're interested in starting a community garden in your area. So it's definitely something that can help you out. And then we have some other resources here too. For Montgomery, you have Eat South. And Eat South is a great organization that is very similar to the Teaching Farm. And in Birmingham, you have Jones Valley Teaching Farm. So those are some great resources locally. If you're looking to start something, in your area and you're closer to one of those, please check them out as well. And of course, Victory, you can find Victory Teaching Farm on Facebook. And of course, you can find Terrence here with me just about every other Monday to ask questions and all that great stuff. But yes, please check out Victory Teaching Farm on Facebook. There's lots of great information there. And I am going to put Terrence's email address up here because, of course, you can always email Terrence with your questions. I know we're deep into the spring planting season now. We had a couple of episodes that you can go back and look at on Facebook and YouTube about spring planting and seeds and all that good stuff. So please, any questions you have, email Terrence. So Terrence, thank you so much. This has been so interesting. And I love, you and I have known each other for years. And I had the fortune of really getting to know the farm before it was really even the farm, back when you were in your smaller plot. So it's really been so exciting to see you grow this beautiful teaching farm. And, I'm looking forward to this fall when hopefully we can get that farm raiser going again. That's a great event. Always fun. Always supports our local farmers and chefs and everyone. So, folks, we are going to be taking a short little hiatus because as I'm sure you are probably tired of hearing me talk about my boys, my kids, and Terrence has some beautiful girls, and our spring breaks are on opposite weeks. So we will be back. We'll be back on April 12th, I believe. Let me check my calendar, make sure I'm saying that right. We'll be back. Let's see. Yes, April 12th. So please stick around. We've got so many more episodes for you. We're going to be doing some Zoom workshops, so stay tuned for those. We've got some stuff where we're going to actually get Terrence out in the garden and getting our hands dirty. And so we encourage you to do the same. And, we just hope you are having a great time with us. We're having a great time. And again, do not hesitate ever to email Terrence. Let me put her email back up here one more time. Here we go. So email Terrence with any of your questions. Just because we're not going to have a show for, a couple weeks doesn't mean that we're not available to answer any of your questions. So, all right. Any closing remarks, Terrence? Any final thoughts on community gardens?
No, and I will say, yes, and I'll say that, I'm really excited when people are interested in doing this. When we first started at that community center, I had a woman, we were working to try to get gardens kind of in different places throughout this particular community and not just at the center. And she asked me, and she was like, do we really need a community garden on every corner? Well, yes, of course, it's food, and why not?
Yeah.
So, I encourage anyone and it's some of the most rewarding work, physically, mentally. I love it so much. I love being around the people, getting outdoors. There's just something about, getting your hands in the dirt and, doing good things in your community and trying to give back and educate and reach out to the community, those maybe that are in need. So, I always encourage anyone, if you're interested in doing something like that, just go for it, because you can make it happen.
Absolutely. And it can be as small or as big as you want it to be. It can be a whole teaching farm, or it can be just a couple of your neighbors together in a small plot of, if somebody has a double lot and they've got extra space. So, it's not meant to be overwhelming, but if it's something that you're interested in doing with, your neighbors and your community, go for it. So,
and I'll just say, and it's kind of our tagline, it only takes one seed to change a city. That's it. Mm-hmm. One seed. It only takes one seed to change a city, a community, a school, just start with that one seed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tarrant. We will see everybody back on April 12th. We've got a quick video of all of our events coming up. We are busy, busy, busy. And we will see you again. Thanks so much, Tarrant. Have a great one.
Thank you, you too. Bye.